function over form, implementation over talk. To many, Dr. Arshia Khan's work is not just a way of life, it is a part of their life. To many of the people who have been struck down with dementia, this is the only way forward. And to many, those who will be diagnosed, unfortunately, with dementia, this is going to be a miracle. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Dr. Arshia Khan. Dr. Arshia, thank you so much for being here today. The work you're doing currently is nothing short of miraculous in a way. Research has taken humans a long way forward. However, to many of those who are not familiar with your work, can you please talk about what it is that you do?
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm honored to be a guest on your media here now. So I'm Arshia Khan. I'm a professor of computer science and director of graduate studies at the University of Minnesota, Duluth campus. And my work is mostly using robotics and wearable sensors to help assist elderly and people affected with dementia. So I do a lot of work mostly in that domain, but I also do some work with children on the spectrum. I do things with, helping depression and other kinds of chronic ailments as well. On another hand, I'm also extremely passionate about encouraging women in computing, because if you look at the number of women that are actually working in the computing fields, is much less than this number that is actually going for that education. So first of all, there are fewer women who go into computing graduate program or undergraduate programs. And then after they graduate, not all of them are staying in this field. There's a lot of concerns, So I'm very passionate about encouraging other women because I can be a role model for them,
Can you share a bit of knowledge on what it is that you do with assisted humanoid robotics?
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of work with humanoid robots. We are not only programming them, but we are also building them in the lab. So we've done several clinical trials. And from all of those clinical trials, we've learned that you can actually help delay the progression. You can help improve the cognition in certain domains, of course. But at least we are able to assist with that. So when the robot goes and interacts with the people, dances, plays music, sings, teaches them how to do yoga, leads, variety of exercises, and does a variety of cognitive stimulation exercises, and can administer lots of therapies, then people are engaged. We found that the people who are affected with dementia prefer working with robots than human beings because they feel like they're not being judged. The robot does not judge them. So they're more comfortable and more trusting with the robots. And I'm often asked this question, are people afraid of the robots? Not the robots that I use, because they're more cartoonish, The more the robot resembles a human, the higher the expectations from it. Like, the more it looks human-like, we expect it to behave human-like. But if it is cartoonish and it's got some flaws, people are more accepting of it. So that's my theory behind using the robots that I use.
So dementia to many is such an umbrella term, and you have so many other illnesses that you have been focusing on. Can you walk us through some of the areas of research that have made big breakthrough and how it could potentially solve them?
Sure, absolutely. So dementia is an umbrella term. And Parkinson's, Lewy body, Alzheimer's, there's a lot of different types of dementia. Of course, Alzheimer's is the largest, right? 70% of the people affected with dementia have the Alzheimer's. And then there's a smaller percentage that is affected by Parkinson's. Then there's vascular dementia. Then there's Lewy body. So there's a variety of them. And we are able to help with daily living activities, like simple activities such as brushing hair, washing face, brushing teeth. Our robots are able to assist with that. So if we can reduce the caregiving burden even by a little, it is very helpful not only for the caregivers, but also for the person who's affected with dementia. Because when a human is working with somebody affected with dementia, let's take an example of, if a person affected with dementia needs to put on an oxygen mask all the time, if somebody has to continuously keep reminding them of it, after a little while, the tone changes, the pitch changes, and, there is some irritation, there's some frustration. But with the robot, that never happens, right? Because the robot can repeat the same thing at the same pitch, without getting any irritation.
What is cognitive stimulation? Could you please explain the core of what it is?
So there's, as the disease progresses, the person is at different levels of cognition. So early on, they have mild cognitive impairment. And before that, actually 20 years before the symptoms start to appear, that's when the disease actually sets in. It takes 20 years for the person to start showing the symptoms. So we can start as soon as the mild cognitive impairment is diagnosed. You can start assisting them, trying to manage them, and help maintain their quality of life. Essentially, at the end, all we are worried about the quality of life, right? So if we can help maintain that quality of life, so if the robot can learn from their behavior, let's say John is recently diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. So then you can understand what John is normally doing, gets up in the morning, reads the newspaper, goes for a walk, and then, takes a shower, has the breakfast, and then sits down and watches television or does some brain-stimulating activities and goes. If that's how the day goes by. The artificial intelligence in combination with the robotics can learn this and try to maintain that. So if John forgets to take a shower, the robot can come in and remind them that the person needs to take the shower.
So artificial intelligence by itself is a very wide and broad spectrum where you have technologies such as machine learning and natural language programming that have made huge waves in the world right now. So how are you implementing this into your research?
Absolutely. So the way my research works is it combines robotics with wearable sensors. So we gather the data from wearable sensors, and then we, of course, apply deep learning and machine learning techniques so that we can understand the patterns and be able to predict what's going to happen next. So let's say if a person starts exhibiting sundowning, so it doesn't just happen like that. There are certain physiological changes that happen. And if we can gather that data and understand how those physiological changes happen over a period of time, we can learn that pattern and be able to predict. And we can say, well, currently their blood pressure is at X, their heart rate is at Y. And within 20 minutes or a couple of hours, they're going to have an episode. So we can preempt it. We can combine robotics and artificial intelligence. We can understand their lifestyle and be able to preempt those episodes. If we are able to preempt that, we can reduce healthcare costs. We can reduce admissions into hospitals because normally these kind of episodes lead into hospitalizations because the people act out, they might get aggressive, they might do some harm to themselves or somebody else. They might exhibit exiting behavior or wander around. So before all that happens, if the robot can go and distract them, and play games with them, do some sort of stimulating activities, like we have been able to use gossip, for instance. Gossip has such a negative connotation, but if you look at a gossip, essentially language was developed for people to be able to gossip, talk about each other. But there's also positive connotation of gossip, that is to pass information. So we have trained our robots to be able to learn about a person. We create an artificial persona that is very similar to the person we are working with. And let's say we are working with John, and John has some mild cognitive impairment to middle stages of dementia. And John used to love to play chess. But as the disease progresses, John will not be interested in playing chess. So the robot can approach John and say, hey, John, how are you doing today? First ask the person, would you be interested in playing chess? And if the person says, no, John says, no, I'm not really. So then the robot can say, by the way, I'm just coming from room 206 and I was playing chess with Mike. And guess what? Mike beat me in chess. I hear you are a really good chess player. Now, by the way, Mike does not exist. Room 206 does not exist because this is a persona that we created for the robot to gossip. So the robot will gossip about Mike and talk to John about Mike to encourage John to do something.
So one of the concerns that I have seen with robotics is that the lack of knowledge of people has actually created a lack of trust in it. So how have you been able to mitigate that, and how are you working towards making it more accessible to people so there is a little more trust that is being created in it?
So we do a lot of studies, there's continuous studies that are going on, and then I go spend time at the memory units for months. I spend with my students trying to understand the problems, and we develop different types of solutions, and we do feasibility studies where we want to see if the solution that we are developing, of course, when we develop this solution, mind you, we work with clinicians because I'm an engineer by trade, right? So I need clinicians who can tell me, well, this is going to be helpful or not. And then we try to test it out. We've done a lot of acceptance studies, feasibility studies. And what we've learned is as the disease progresses, some people are more attracted to robots. They prefer working with the robots. And the reason being because the robot does not tell them what to do and what not to do. It just interacts, and it's like silly. It's playing games. It does karaoke with them. It does dance therapy with them. It teaches them how to breathe, yoga. So they feel like it's a companion rather than a child, a son or a daughter telling them, Mom, don't do this, behave like this and don't behave like this. So they feel more comfortable working with the robot. We have never had anybody up until now afraid of the robots. Or even, yes, there are some people who are hesitant to interacting with the robots. That is more early on. Later stages, they're more comfortable with the robot than the human beings.
What are some immediate concerns that have to be raised with the research that you do?
So immediately, I think the thing that we need is a lot of data. And data that's not biased. That's helpful because when we train our models on this data. And there is a lot of evidence of bias in artificial intelligence. Because when these models are trained, they're usually trained on a specific population. That means it does not work on other populations as well as it works on this population. So we need diversity of thought. We need diversity in the data itself. So that is the most critical thing that we need. How are we gathering this data to train our models? And how are we planning this forward,
So one of the concerns, as you stated, is getting data. So data is king when it comes to machine learning and artificial intelligence. So how are you ethically sourcing data right now? And one of the concerns is that healthcare institutions may not be happy to dole out the information to companies about people because these are also privileged information. But how are you looking at sourcing data that could be as old as 20 years? Because obviously you're looking at the progression of a patient who's been struck down with dementia, and so many parameters would be involved with that. So how are you looking at sourcing this data? And If not, are you looking at doing it now? And when can we see positive results emulating from this?
So this work has to start at some point, right? And we've started it. So we are gathering a lot of data using our wearable sensors and our robots. So currently, to comply with HIPAA, I don't know if you're familiar with HIPAA, that's the regulations that are imposed by the healthcare system in the United States. So we try to follow HIPAA, and we have created a system where the data is stored anonymously. So even if somebody is able to hack into our servers, by the way, the servers are highly secure, but still they're getting this anonymous data, and we only connect that data to the person at a certain point where we are separating the data from the identity of the person. So when the robot comes and interacts, it will interact with the person by their first name. But when the data is stored, it's not stored with that person's first name.
Can you also talk a little bit about how AI and machine learning are helping you in prosthetic development and research?
Yes, we've done a lot of work on that. So since I work with all types of wearable sensors, we've combined the EEG data, EMG data, and EDA data. So there's 3 different sensors. So the EEG is essentially understanding the brain signals. EMG is understanding the muscle signals. And EDA is the electrodermal activity. So physiologically how the person is feeling. So like supposing somebody's lost their right arm, we can use their left arm to understand how they're moving, how their brain is connecting with the muscles. So we gather the EEG data, we gather the EMG data, and the EDA, which is the physiological data, and be able to connect that to a prosthetic artificial arm to be used for the right arm. So we've been working on that as well.
Dr. Arshia, you are also a very strong advocate for STEM and diversity and inclusion and bringing women into the area of STEM. It's such an important process to bring in every faction of society into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So how are you working towards this?
If you look at the number of women that actually are in computer science, it's very few, between 10 to 17% women are actually in the computing fields. And we need to do something about that because women are very compassionate and passionate about what they do. So we need to bring the diversity of thought, the diversity of ideas, the diversity in finding solutions. And unless we have that, we will not be able to innovate and get the best solutions we should be getting. So I do a lot of work. I have secured several grants, a few NSF grants, Google grants, Claire Booth Luch grants, and many other grants to encourage women and diverse people into computer science.
How the key factors of STEM is it's such an evolving space. You have artificial intelligence that's coming in and changing the curriculum of STEM. So are you worried about the current STEM curriculum that is in our schools?
I think we do need to work on adding some more STEM education, especially computer science. I don't think computer science should be a specialized field. It should be a liberal education. So meaning everybody should be learning computing skills. It should be like a basic, like you learn a English language, whatever language you're working in, whichever country you are in. Computer science should be the same way because it's the basis for everything. Like when I'm working in lab, we are not only working on coding, we are also working on building the robots because you need to think wider. You need to have a wider scope rather than thinking small. So we need that diversity of thought and we need to be able to help educate at a younger stage. And people are very passionate about, stories. When you tell them about what happened to person X and how this disease progressed, they're very curious and they want to help. At the end of the day, people want to do good, to care for others. And so if we can show them artificial intelligence and robotics can be helpful because you give anybody a tool and it can be used in a positive way or a negative way. So we need to encourage the positive use rather than the negative. And so if you teach them early on, educate them about artificial intelligence, and teach them how to use it correctly to enhance their skills rather than, killing their creativity, I think we can do better.